Hey, friends, welcome back to the Do Cool Shit podcast. I am recording this hours later than I wanted to because my day went super wild. Something that I thought was going to take a short amount of time took 3 hours. So, this is a great time for this topic that I have planned out. We're going to talk about stress and a lot more on this topic. So, stress is something that we hear a lot. That's a word that we hear a lot about. And most people think stress in and of itself is the problem. And I definitely used to be one of those people up until recently. Since I've really started to dig into the nitty gritty of stress and like what it really is and the nervous system and everything it does and like a whole bunch of psychology, like I've been nerding out, friends. I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's something else. Spoiler alert, I think it really has to do with capacity. Stress is something that we it's become something that like we bond over. We joke about it, we complain about it, we almost wear it like a proof that we're doing a lot. People are like, "Oh, how are you?" "I'm really, really busy, feeling stressed out." And at the same time, there's so much advice out there. You need to manage your stress better. You should slow down. You need more balance. And we know these things. They're all good and well, and they aren't necessarily helpful guide points, right? They can feel wildly unhelpful when our life is really, really full. And I also think there's a part here that again goes into capacity. We're going to dive so deep into this today that people don't really understand this and where they're actually at, especially if you're a parent, if you're working, if you're training, if you're trying to take care of yourself and everyone else, then we tend to say, I hear this all the time. I used to say this all the time. When things calm down, I'll feel better. I'm just waiting for things to calm down so I can do that. And I had just joked about this with a client recently because I was like, hey, this is life. Things aren't gonna calm down, right? Like, it is nice when things calm down, when we have a vacation or a day off or a date night. Like, that is nice. That is things calming down for sure. But if we're being real, stress for every human being, especially these days, especially in this world that we live in, is not a phase. It's part of life. And I would say, especially if you're someone who is a high performer, someone who has high expectations for themselves and has high standards for themselves, especially if you're a parent, if you're someone who's setting out to do cool shit. So today, I really want to shift the conversation because trying to eliminate stress is just a losing game. Honestly, trying to eliminate it or just kind of being in that space where you're like, yeah, it's there and not necessarily like really being able to do anything about it because you don't know what to do about it. That usually creates more stress because people feel broken. A side note here is also if we eliminated stress entirely, that would make us pretty freaking fragile. So we don't want to do that either. So today's conversation's not about eliminating stress. It's more about understanding it and then being able to kind of move through it and use it more even to our advantage. I've said it before and I will say it again. And I truly think this is something that I will continue saying forever is that stress isn't inherently bad. Again, that spoiler alert I gave you before, I think the real issue is capacity and that most people are living at or beyond their capacity without realizing it. So, first, let's just kind of talk about what stress is. Stress is not it's not a mindset failing, it's not a weakness, it's not a sign that you can't handle things, it's not a sign of your incompetence. Stress is very simply your nervous system responding to demand. And that demand can come from things like work, kids, training, poor eating, poor sleep, emotional suppression or dysregulation, conflict, pressure you put on yourself. This is a non-exhaustive list, but these are just examples. And your nervous system doesn't rank stress. It doesn't care if it's a deadline or a hard workout or an argument or skipping meals. It also doesn't know the difference between a tiger chasing you and your doorbell ringing while you're cooking dinner and answering a text message and trying to keep track of one more thing. Different scenarios, but same nervous system response to your body. It's all demand, it's all energy output, it's all load. And there's a term for this. It's called allostatic load. And that's basically the cumulative cost of stress over time. And you don't need to remember this term. I want to give you these terms so you have this knowledge base, but you don't need to remember it. What you do need to remember is that stress isn't bad. Being under recovered is the thing that is harmful. And there are two types of stress. So if you didn't know, now you know. There is acute stress. Acute stress is short term, it is mobilizing, it is purposeful, and it builds capacity when followed by recovery. So we can think about acute stress in things like strength training, a big presentation or a deadline, a challenging conversation. Your system ramps up, you meet that demand, and then you come back down. That up and down is healthy, and that's how capacity is built. The chronic stress, the second type of stress, is different. It is low grade, it's constant, it's often invisible, and it's usually normalized. So this looks like always feeling slightly rushed, never feeling relaxed, living in urgency, feeling behind even on those quote unquote easy days. This is when you never fully come down, when urgency becomes your baseline, when being quote unquote on feels normal. And because it's familiar, people think this is just how I am. Again, like this is what their baseline is. And I don't include myself in this because I have been here before and didn't know it. But just because something is normal doesn't mean that it's neutral or ideal. And chronic stress isn't necessarily about intensity, it's about duration without relief. And here's where this gets really important because stress doesn't just live in your head. Your nervous system is basically it's like the communication hub for your entire body. Everything else is listening to it. Your hormones, your digestion, your immune system, your metabolism, they don't operate independently. So you can kind of think about your nervous system like the manager that sends all of the messages out. And when it perceives safety, the messages can sound like we can digest, we can recover, we can repair, we can build muscle, we can burn energy efficiently, we can reproduce. But when it perceives threat or overload, the messages change and they turn into like, we need to conserve, we need to protect, not now. It puts a lot of those kind of like basic basic functions, I would say, because your body is still operating. But a lot of the things that are extra, digestion, reproduction, muscle building, all of those extra things that You don't necessarily need to stay alive. It's like, hold on, we're in danger. We don't need to do that right now. So this part matters a lot. Your body, again, like doesn't prioritize that optimal living when it thinks survival is at state. And I want to note here that your body's job is survival, and it will do everything it possibly can to keep you alive. Like, it's really freaking smart. It is like your best friend, and it has your back, so to speak. A lot of us view it differently, like, oh, our body's turning on us. But really, what it's doing is it's trying to protect you and it's trying to keep you alive because it just perceives threat and danger and thinks that like you're gonna be not alive, that your life is at risk. So this is where we hear a lot of people say things like, it's my hormones, I'm getting older, my metabolism is broken. A lot of women blame perimenopause. When they have issues with their gut, they feel bloated, they have a hard time losing weight. These are a lot of the things that we hear. And I will also say that this isn't to say, especially when it comes to things like perimenopause or menopause, it's not to say that these changes are not shocking and very, very real. That's a whole different podcast for sure. And I would say if we're not looking at stress in the nervous system first, then we're missing a really, really, really big piece of the puzzle. So, yes, like hormones really do matter. Age does matter. Physiology matters, but hormones don't operate in a vacuum. When your nervous system is under chronic stress, cortisol can stay elevated, or it's dysregulated. So this is where cortisol gets demonized a lot of the time. Cortisol in and of itself, again, not inherently bad, just like stress. Cortisol is a stress hormone, not inherently bad, but when it stays elevated or it's dysregulated, then that's where we start to see some chaos happen. Reproductive hormones often get deprioritized. Again, like, why the heck would your body want to have a baby if it thinks that it's in danger, right? We're going back to like, just think about a caveman. It's like, heck no, I'm not doing that. Hunger and fullness cues get really distorted. If you're in battle, then your body's not gonna be like, you know what, this is a safe time to allow us to focus on digestion. No, it's going to be like, no, we need to survive and we need to put all of our resources towards that. Blood sugar regulation becomes harder. So your body isn't malfunctioning, it's responding. And again, what a lot of people would call quote unquote hormone issues, and this is all the rage these days, really are often downstream effects of things like chronic underfueling, poor sleep, potentially overtraining, emotional suppression, dysregulation, and constant mental load, chronic stress. And that brings us back to capacity as well. Digestion and immunity are also really, really big things in here. Digestion is one of the first things that gets deprioritized under stress. If your nervous system is in protection mode, your digestion slows, absorption slows. So you think about if you eat something, then the digestion is slowed, absorption of the vitamins and minerals and nutrients from that food aren't as good. And then bloating and discomfort can increase. And same thing with immunity. Your immune system is incredibly energy expensive. So if your system doesn't feel safe, it says, yeah, we don't have the resources for this right now. This isn't a priority. And that's why people who are under chronic stress often get sick more frequently or take longer to recover or feel inflamed or run down most of the time. And it's not because they're weak, it's because their system is overloaded. So, often people are trying to fix those outputs like their hormones or their digestion, their energy, their body composition without addressing the input system that actually regulates all of it. So, this is where I would call like there's a domino effect, and the lead domino being things like when you work on nervous system regulation and sleep and fueling and your capacity, you often see improvements in all of those downstream areas. I've seen this with myself. I've seen this with so many of my clients, and I see this in case studies with other coaches that I am in like mentorship groups with as well. This is a huge, huge topic here. So you see improvements in hormones, digestion, energy, body composition when we work on our nervous system regulation and everything that goes into that. Not because like you're forced to change, but because you remove that constant signal of threat. When your system doesn't feel like it's threatened, it can calm down and it can then be in a state to do what you want it to do, essentially. And that's why nervous system regulation and capacity are often those lead dominoes in health and well being. And that's why I focus on these things so much with people. So, when we talk about capacity, I like to use a visual of a cup. So, imagine you have a cup. Everything in your life pours into that cup: work, family responsibilities, your training. Even if you undereat or you don't sleep poorly or you drink a whole bunch of alcohol, those things get poured in. Emotional suppression or dysregulation there, mental load, pressure to be optimal, everything you have on your to-do list that's stuck in your head. When that cup fills faster than it empties, you can visualize what happens, right? Like it spills. There's spillover, and that spillover looks like things like reactivity, irritability, shutdown, anxiety, numbness, feeling behind when nothing is quote unquote wrong, injuries, and again, a lot of these things like the hormones, the bloat, the digestion issues, all, these type of things. And most people think stress management means, well, I need to stop things from going into the cup. And yeah, that's absolutely one lever that we can pull, but there's also a really big second lever that we can pull, and that is to build a bigger cup. Most people never focus on that unless you've worked with me or a coach that recognizes these things. And we're going to talk about how to build a bigger cup. I'm going to do an episode 2 on this because I know that this is a ton of information. So I want to break this up into 2 episodes, where episode 2, we're going to focus a lot more on how to actually build capacity and how to regulate your nervous system and live in where you're living in that more like quote unquote optimal state. But signs that your cup is always full, let's look at this first. You may feel tense even when you're resting. Slowing down feels uncomfortable, or you feel guilty when you slow down or when you try to rest. You're productive, but you're not regulated. So, productivity can be such a tricky word, right? But this also means that you know what regulated feels like. So, like feeling kind of steady in your body. Um, you cope with stimulation. So, things like scrolling, eating, binge watching Real Housewives. You're constantly moving. Eating, alcohol. Did I say eating twice? I don't even know. And you say, I'm fine, but your body disagrees. Like you don't really, really, really feel fine. this isn't an indicator that there's something wrong with you. So I want to say that first and foremost. And it's not a discipline issue, it is a capacity issue. Awareness to this is the first step. We always say awareness is key. So, really starting to pay attention to just how you feel in your body. Noticing, are your breaths shallow a lot of the time? Do you feel tension in your chest, in your jaw, in your shoulders? Do you struggle with falling asleep? Do you feel bloated a lot of the time? If you have a cycle, is it regular? Do you have extreme symptoms? Side note here is that severe period related symptoms or cycle related symptoms are not, they may be normal, but they're not something that I would say I don't care about. It's like that is another narrative that has been worked into our lives. But severe symptoms are actually a sign to some to look at something. That's not something that I would call um ideal or something that I would say people really should expect to be living with. I would say that's probably pretty normal, but that's because a lot of our society is living in a chronically stressed state. So, in the next episode, we're going to talk about building capacity, regulating your nervous system, and how to stop relying on willpower to hold everything together. So, tune back in next week. We're going to dot on this episode. But as you move forward in doing the cool shit that you are doing, your job here is to create awareness. And I will also be attaching some worksheets to these episodes as well. So make sure that you check that out. I'll attach the worksheets to episode 2 because, to be honest, I was gonna do it on this one, but I'm recording late. I didn't manage my time well because this appointment took longer than I thought it was going to. So, if you want the worksheet before, you can message me, shoot me an email, but I will absolutely attach it to the second part of this stress episodes and capacity series. And as always, if this episode was helpful, give it a like. Make sure you're following the podcast. Leave a review if you haven't already. This really, really helps to spread the word, help other people get this stuff out into the universe. And I really, really, really appreciate you for doing any and all things that help do that. If you're finding this information helpful, supportive, then it's very likely that other people will as well. And as always, I thank you for being here. You mean more to me than you know. And I will catch you next time.